The banquet hall smelled like white lilies and expensive cologne. It was my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, and I was seated at table 14. Table 14 was in the back, near the kitchen doors, next to the coat check. Every time a waiter pushed through the swinging doors, a gust of warm, greasy air hit the back of my neck. My sister Margot was at table 1. She was giving a toast. She was radiant. She was always radiant. She held the microphone like she'd been born with it in her hand, and maybe she had. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a linen napkin, smiling up at Margot like she was watching the sun rise. My father had his arm around my mother's chair, nodding, his jaw tight with pride. They looked like a portrait. They looked like the kind of family you see in a magazine spread about old Ottawa money. And I was at table 14, with the coat check. But before I tell you how everything at that party turned inside out, like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? I grew up in a limestone house in Rockcliffe Park. If you know Ottawa, you know that neighborhood. It's where diplomats live. It's where senators live. It's where people like my father, Douglas Ashford, live. My father was a corporate lawyer. Bay Street trained, but he'd moved to Ottawa because he liked proximity to power more than proximity to money. He sat on boards. He chaired fundraisers. He played golf with people whose names you'd recognize from the news. He valued one thing above everything else: visibility. If it couldn't be seen, measured, photographed, or written about in the Ottawa Citizen, it didn't exist. My mother, Patricia, was the same. But her currency was social grace. She was the woman who organized the Chatterjee galas at the Chateau Laurier. She was the woman who knew every ambassador's wife by first name. She ran our household like a diplomatic mission. Every dinner was a performance. Every outfit was a statement. Every interaction was managed. And then there was Margot. Margot was 3 years older than me. She was tall, blonde, effortlessly charming. She had our mother's cheekbones and our father's confidence. She'd studied communications at Queen's, graduated top of her class, and immediately launched a PR consulting firm that got written up in the Globe and Mail before she even had a proper office. She was the kind of person who walked into a room and the room rearranged itself around her. My father would read her press mentions at breakfast. "Did you see this, Patricia? Margot's firm just landed the tourism board account." My mother would beam. "Of course she did. She's an Ashford." And then there was me, Jocelyn. Jocelyn. To the few people who bothered to shorten it, I was not tall. I was not blonde. I was not effortlessly anything. I was the quiet one. The one who read too much. The one who preferred the kitchen to the living room. The one who, at family dinners, could sit through an entire 4-course meal without anyone directing a single question at me. I learned very early that in the Ashford house, attention was a limited resource, and Margot had consumed every last drop of it. My father spoke to me in status updates. "Jocelyn, your marks are fine. Jocelyn, your resume needs work. Jocelyn, have you thought about law school? Fine. Needs work. Have you thought about?" These were not conversations. They were performance reviews, and the review was always the same: adequate, unremarkable, below the Ashford standard. My mother was softer about it, but the softness was worse. She'd look at me with this expression. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment exactly. It was a kind of gentle bewilderment, like she couldn't quite figure out how I'd ended up in this family. "Joss, sweetheart," she'd say, adjusting my collar before a dinner party. "Just try to be a little more present tonight, okay? Don't hide in the corner." What she meant was, don't embarrass us. What she meant was, be more like Margot. Margot understood her role in all of this. She wasn't cruel. Not exactly. She was efficient. She had absorbed my parents' value system so completely that she didn't even question it. She simply operated within it, and I was outside the operating system. "Joss, Northie wants to hear about sourdough starters at a dinner party," she told me once, scrolling through her phone. "Talk about something interesting." "Like what?" "Like anything. Your trip, your job, your goals." "I work at a bakery," I said. "I know," she said. And the way she said it, the slight drop in her voice, the tiny pause, told me everything. She knew. and she was embarrassed by it. I should tell you about the bakery. After I graduated from the University of Ottawa with a degree in computer science, a degree my father called practical but unimpressive, I did not go to law school. I did not join a consulting firm. I did not do any of the things an Ashford was supposed to do. I got a job at a bakery on Bank Street called the Flour Mill. It was small, the ceiling was low. The espresso machine was older than me and made a sound like a wounded animal every time you pulled a shot. The owner was a woman named Greta. She was 62, originally from Kitchener, and she had hands like leather from decades of kneading dough. She paid me $17.50 an hour, which in Ottawa, with rent the way it is, meant I was barely surviving. My father thought it was a phase. My mother thought it was a cry for help. Margot thought it was pathetic. But the flour mill was the first place in my life where I felt real. Greta didn't care about my last name. She cared about whether the croissants were laminated properly. She cared about whether the sourdough had the right crumb. She'd taste a loaf I'd made, nod once and say, "Good. That's yours." She'd write my name on the chalkboard next to the loaf. Joss's Country White. Joss's Rye. It was small, it was honest, it was mine. But the bakery also showed me a problem. Every Tuesday and Friday, Greta would stand in the back alley and watch the bread truck from the distributor arrive. It always came at the worst time, right in the middle of the morning rush, locking the back door, forcing us to stop serving while we hauled in flour and sugar and eggs. And every week, Greta threw away bread. Good bread. Loaves that were one day past their sell-by date, but still perfectly fine. She'd bag them up and leave them by the dumpster. Sometimes the shelter on Gloucester Street would pick them up. Sometimes they didn't. It killed her. She'd grown up during a time when you didn't waste food. She'd mutter about it while she wiped down the counters. 30 yolks, Joss. 30 good loaves in the bin. That's not right. I watched her face when she said it, and something clicked. I started thinking about it at night, in my tiny apartment on Lisgar Street. Not just Greta's waste, but all of it. The entire supply chain, the bakeries, the restaurants, the grocery stores across Ottawa, across Ontario, across the whole country, throwing away perfectly good food because the logistics were broken. The deliveries came at the wrong times. The inventory systems were outdated. The sell-by dates were arbitrary. The data was there, but nobody was connecting it. I started with a notebook. I sketched out a system. What if you could connect every bakery, every restaurant, every food bank in a city into one network? What if the system could predict exactly how much bread a bakery would sell on a given Tuesday based on weather, foot traffic, holidays, local events? What if it could reroute surplus food to shelters and food banks in real time before it hit the dumpster? It was a logistics problem. And I was good at problems. I took the idea to a professor I'd kept in touch with from U Ottawa. She told me it was ambitious. She introduced me to two people. Wesley, a machine learning specialist who lived on instant ramen and could build neural networks in his sleep. And Sadie, an environmental science major who had spent 2 years working for a food bank in Hamilton and understood the non-profit side of the equation. We became a team. We worked out of Wes's apartment in Centretown, a one-bedroom that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and dry erase markers. We covered the walls in flowcharts. We argued about data models at 2 in the morning. We ate a lot of shawarma from the place on Rideau. We called it reflow. The concept was simple, but the execution was complex. Our algorithm would analyze a business's entire food supply chain, from the warehouse to the shelf to the plate, and find the waste. It would predict surplus. It would match surplus to need. It would optimize delivery schedules. It would turn waste into resource. In our first pilot, using data from 12 Ottawa bakeries, including Greta's, Reflow reduced food waste by 23% and redirected over 4,000 kilograms of surplus food to shelters and food banks in a single month. 23%. That wasn't just interesting. That was transformative. We built a working demo. Sadie, with her non-profit connections and her relentless energy, got us a table at the Collision Conference in Toronto. It was a massive hall full of flashy fintech startups and VR demos. And then there was us. a laptop showing spreadsheets, and a map of Ottawa with little dots representing bread deliveries. Nobody stopped. Not for the first 3 hours. I started to feel the old sting, that familiar invisibility. Nobody cares about bread logistics, Wes muttered, adjusting his glasses. It's not exciting. Just wait, CD said. Her smile was calm and certain. The right person will fee it. She was right. A woman stopped. She was maybe 50. She wore a simple dark blazer, no jewelry except a watch. She watched our demo loop for a full 5 minutes without speaking. Then she turned to me. Who designed the core allocation algorithm? She asked. Her voice was quiet and precise. I did, I said. Walk me through the predictive model, she said. So I did. I taught for 15 minutes. I explained how it used weather data, transit patterns, even social media activity to predict consumer behavior. She nodded. She asked 4 questions. They were hard. They were exactly the right questions. She handed me a card. Catherine Aldridge, CEO, Meridian Supply Systems. Meridian was one of the largest food distribution companies in Canada. She looked at all 3 of us. My office. Monday. 9 a.m. Bring your projections and your lawyer. And she walked away. The meeting was not in a boardroom. It was in a small restaurant in Yorkville. Catherine sat across from us with her CFO and her head of operations. She didn't waste time. Reflow is not a school project, she said, stirring her tea. It's the most sophisticated waste reduction platform I've seen in this country. We spent the weekend stress testing your data model. It held. She slid a folder across the table. We want to acquire Reflow. We want to integrate it across our entire national distribution network. And we want to hire the team that built it. I opened the folder. The number on the first page was $4.8 million. My hands went cold. Wes looked like he might pass out. Sadie just grinned. There's more, Catherine said, looking directly at me. The platform is excellent, but it needs its architect. The offer is contingent on you, Ms. Ashford, joining Meridian as our Director of Sustainable Operations. Director of Sustainable Operations, Ms. Ashford. I looked at the number. I thought about my father, who called my bakery job a phase. I thought about my mother, who told me to be more present. I thought about Margot, who was embarrassed that her sister made bread for a living. I closed the folder. We accept, I said. We signed 2 days later. Quiet. No champagne. Just lawyers and the scratch of pens on heavy paper. The money would be held in escrow and released the moment the acquisition was publicly announced, which would be Saturday evening. Saturday, the night of my parents' 35th wedding anniversary party. I didn't tell my family. This wasn't a trophy for my father's shelf. This wasn't a story for Margot's Instagram. This was mine. I had built it in the margins. In the hours they thought I was just kneading dough and wasting my potential. They thought I was flour on my hands and nothing in my head. They were about to learn that I was the foundation they'd been standing on without knowing it. The week before the party, I received the seating chart. My mother emailed it to Margot and me with the subject line, Final layout, do not change. I found my name. Table 14. I counted the tables on the chart. There were 14. I was at the last one. The one closest to the kitchen. The one furthest from the head table, where my parents and Margot's husband and their closest friends would be sitting under the chandelier. I stared at it. I wasn't surprised. I was just tired. I texted my mother, Hey mom, I noticed I'm at table 14. Is that right? The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. 10 minutes later, Margot texted me, Don't make this weird, Joss. It's about seating logistics. Table 14 has a great view of the room. Besides, you don't know half the people at the front tables. You just sit there quietly anyway. Seating logistics. The word logistics hit different now. I knew more about logistics than anyone in that family would ever understand. I texted back one word, okay. I would go. I would sit at table 14. I would be the quiet one, the afterthought, the girl who makes bread, because I had a secret. And it was sitting in a black leather binder in my apartment, waiting. The 2 days before the party were the stillest days of my life. I went to a Staples off Merivale Road. I walked past the colorful notebooks and the trendy planners. I went to the back aisle, the one for accountants and lawyers. I bought a heavy black 3-ring binder. I bought sheet protectors and blank divider tabs. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and built my case. I printed the acquisition contract, all 22 pages. I printed the signature page with my name and Catherine Aldridge's name side by side. I printed my employment contract, Director of Sustainable Operations. I printed the press release, embargoed until 8 p.m. Saturday. I printed the financial projections, the pilot data from the Ottawa bakeries, the 23% waste reduction results, the letters of support from 3 food banks. I slid each page into a sheet protector. I organized everything with surgical precision. Tab 1, Acquisition. Tab 2, Employment. Tab 3, Impact Data. Tab 4, Press Coverage. When the binder was full, I closed it. The snap echoed in my quiet apartment. It was heavy. It was the heaviest thing I had ever held. In the bottom drawer of my desk, under a stack of old textbooks, I found a recipe card. It was written in my father's handwriting, from back when his handwriting was still warm and loose, not the tight, controlled script he used now. It was a recipe for butter tarts. He'd written it out for me when I was 9. We'd made them together one Sunday afternoon. The kitchen had been a mess. Flour everywhere. He'd laughed. He'd actually laughed. At the bottom of the card, in pencil, he'd written, Joss's famous butter tarts, world's best baker. I ran my finger over the words, world's best baker. When did that man disappear? When did I stop being his little baker and become his disappointment? Was it when Margot got into Queens? Was it when he realized my dreams didn't photograph well for the Christmas card? I placed the recipe card next to the acquisition contract. One was a promise, the other was proof. I didn't need his permission. I had never needed it. I slid the card back into the drawer. I had the binder. The anniversary party was at the Fairmont Chateau Laurier. Of course it was. My mother would never hold a significant event anywhere else. The ballroom was enormous, dripping with crystal and candlelight. There were 200 guests. Politicians, lawyers, diplomats, business leaders. The kind of room where everyone is performing and nobody admits it. I arrived 10 minutes late. On purpose. I was wearing a simple black dress and flats. No jewelry. My mother would have called it plain. I called it deliberate. I found table 14. It was exactly where I expected it to be. Next to the kitchen doors. Every time a server came through, the door would swing open and I'd catch a blast of steam and the sound of clattering dishes. My table mates were pleasant strangers, people my parents knew vaguely from the neighborhood. They smiled politely. They did not ask me anything about myself. At the front of the room, my family glowed. My father stood at the podium and gave a speech about legacy, about building something that lasts, about the Ashford name and what it represents. My mother dabbed her eyes. Margot sat beside her, camera ready, her smile practiced and luminous. Then Margot took the microphone. She talked about my parents' love, about their dedication, about how they had built a family that stood for excellence. She mentioned herself, her firm, her husband, her plans for the future. She did not mention me. Not once. 200 people in that room. Not later, over the phone, meant not laters. In the dry bear, was invisible. I was the co-check. Then the MC returned to the podium. He was smiling in a way that suggested he knew something the room didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, before we continue with dinner, we have a special guest who has asked to say a few words. Please welcome the Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, the Honorable Nadine Tremblay. The room shifted. A murmur went through the crowd. My father sat up straighter. My mother's eyes went wide. Nadine Tremblay was not on the guest list. She wasn't even from my parents' circle. She was federal cabinet. She walked to the podium in a navy suit, her silver hair pulled back. She was calm, authoritative, warm. She smiled at my parents. Douglas, Patricia, congratulations on 35 years, she said. That's a wonderful milestone. But I have to confess, I'm not here tonight for the anniversary. A ripple of confusion went through the room. My father's smile tightened. I'm here. the minister continued, because of someone at this party who has done something extraordinary, something that is going to change how this country thinks about food waste. She paused. Over the past 2 years, a young woman from right here in Ottawa built a technology platform called reupload. Her team's pilot project reduced food waste by 23% across 12 bakeries in this city and redirected over 4,000 kilograms of surplus food to shelters. My father's face was blank. He didn't recognize the name. My mother looked confused. Margot was scrolling her phone under the table, probably looking it up. This afternoon, the minister said, the government of Canada signed a $12 million contract with Meridian Supply Systems to deploy reupload as the national standard for food waste reduction across all federally funded food distribution programs. She let the number sit. 12 million. And the architect of reupload, the woman who built this platform from a notebook in a bakery kitchen, is sitting in this room tonight. She looked toward the back of the ballroom. She looked at table 14. She looked at me. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in congratulating Jocelyn Ashford, Director of Sustainable Operations at Meridian Supply Systems, and, as of today, a recipient of the Governor General's Innovation Award. The room erupted. 200 heads turned. They turned past table 1, past my father's frozen face, past my mother's open mouth, past Margot, who had dropped her phone. They turned all the way to table 14, to me. The girl at the coat check table, the afterthought. The bread baker. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were still. I had waited my whole life for this, but not for the applause. I had waited for the look on their faces. My father was white. Not red, not flushed with pride. White. He was recalculating. I could see it. The man who valued visibility was staring at the most visible accomplishment that had ever been associated with his name, and he had seated it next to the kitchen. My mother's hand was over her mouth. She was crying, but they weren't tears of joy. They were tears of horror. She was realizing what she had done, where she had put me. Margot wasn't moving. Her phone was face down on the table. The golden child, the PR expert, the one who controlled every narrative, had just been blindsided by a narrative she never saw coming. Her face was completely blank. I walked to the podium. 200 people watched me walk from the back of that room to the front. It was the longest walk of my life. It was also the shortest. The minister shook my hand. She was warm. She leaned in and whispered, "You earned this." I took the microphone. I looked out at the room. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I looked at Margot. "Thank you, Minister Tremblay," I said. My voice was clear and calm. I didn't plan a speech because I honestly wasn't sure anyone in this room knew I was here. A few people laughed. They thought it was a joke. My family did not laugh. I built flow in the kitchen of a bakery on Bank Street, I said. I built it because my boss Greta was throwing away 30 loaves of good bread every week, and it broke her heart. I built it because I learned that in Canada, we waste 35 million tons of food a year, while food banks can't keep up with demand. I built it because someone told me once that what I did was boring, that nobody wanted to hear about it. I built it because nobody was watching. I didn't look at Margot when I said that. I didn't need to. I felt it land. To my partners, Wes and Sadie, I continued, who believed in this idea before anyone else did, and who are probably watching this from Wes's apartment in Centertown right now, eating shawarma, thank you. You are my team and my family. I paused. My father's eyes were wet. I had never seen that before. I thought about the recipe card. Joss's famous butter tarts. World's best baker. I thought about the 9-year-old girl in the flower-covered kitchen. She would have given anything for this moment. But I wasn't 9 anymore. And this, I said, is for every person who has ever been seated at table 14. The back table. The afterthought table. The one they put you at when they've already decided you don't matter. If you're all at that table right now, I want you to know something. The view from table 14 is just fine. You can see everything from back here, including who forgot to save you a seat. I set the microphone down. The room was silent for one breath. Then they stood. All of them. 200 people. The standing ovation lasted longer than Margot's toast. I walked back through the crowd. People reached out to shake my hand. Strangers. They were saying things I couldn't quite hear over the noise. My father intercepted me near the bar. His face was a wreck, controlled, but cracking at the edges. Jocelyn, he said. His voice was thick. This is extraordinary. Why didn't you tell us? There it was, the line I had been waiting for. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at him. My voice was steady. You didn't ask, I said. You never once asked what I was working on. You never once walked into that bakery. You never once opened the door. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My mother appeared at his side. Her makeup was ruined. Joss, darling, she said, grasping my hand, we had no idea. We're so proud of you. We should move you to our table. We should move you to our data. You should tell everyone now, I asked. Now that there's a minister standing next to me? Yes, she said, not understanding why I was asking. Of course, we're so proud. I looked at her. I felt the old ache, the one that lives in your chest when you're a child, and your mother looks past you. But I was not a child anymore. You seated me at table 14, I said quietly, so only she could hear. You put me next to the kitchen. You didn't mention me in your speech. Neither did Margot. I was in this room for 2 hours, and not one of you came to my table. Not once. Her face crumbled. We didn't mean. It was just seating. Joss, it's just a table. It's never just a table, Mom, I said. It was never just a table. Margot found me near the coat check. Fitting. She was pale. Her composure, her unshakable PR polish was gone. She looked small. Joss, she said. Her voice was high and thin. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at her. I told you about my work once. Do you remember what you said? She blinked. I don't, she said. You said nobody wants to hear about sourdough starters. Her mouth opened. I didn't know. That's the point, Margot. You didn't want to know. I had my coat on. My binder was in my bag. The black leather binder full of contracts and data and proof. I didn't show it to them. I didn't need to. The minister had done it for me. The government of Canada had done it for me. Jocelyn, my father said, his voice cracking. We should sit down. We should talk about this. This is wonderful. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. You made your seating chart. I made mine. I walked toward the door. Joss, Margot called out. Her voice broke. It was the sound of the golden child realizing the narrative had changed. You can't just leave. What about us? What about the family? I stopped. I turned. I looked at the three of them. My father, his face grey with regret. My mother, her hands twisting her napkin. Margot half standing, her mascara running. That's a good question, Margot, I said. What about the family? You had 200 guests tonight. You seated me at the back table. You didn't mention my name. You made it very clear where I stand. I'm just respecting the seating chart. I turned and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't run. I walked. I heard my footsteps on the marble floor of the Chateau Laurier. I heard my mother start to cry. I heard my father say, Patricia, not here. I didn't look back. The November air hit my face when I pushed through the front doors. It was cold, Ottawa cold, the kind of cold that makes your lungs ache. It felt like the first real breath I had taken in 28 years. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. It was 8:07 am. The embargo had lifted. Notifications flooded in. CBC News, The Globe and Mail. Beta Kit, Ottawa Citizen. My name everywhere. Jocelyn Ashford. I stood on the steps of the Chateau Laurier, reading my own story on my phone. I glanced back through the tall windows. I could see the ballroom, the chandelier, the head table. They were silhouettes, still frozen, still processing. They were inside in the warm light with their champagne and their legacy speech. I was outside in the cold, my name on every screen. They had spent 28 years deciding I wasn't worth a seat at the front table. The government of Canada had just given me a seat at the biggest table in the country. The text started that night. Margot, Joss, people are calling me asking about you. We need to talk. This is a PR situation. An hour later, you're being selfish. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Mom, darling, come home. I bought that blue coat you liked. We can talk. Your father is so proud. He's telling everyone at the club. Dad, 2 days later, the first text he'd ever sent me, Jocelyn. I've reviewed the public details of the Meridian contract. Strong structure. I have thoughts on your tax strategy and long-term IP positioning. Call me. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't say he was sorry. He said he had thoughts on my tax strategy. He was trying to manage my success the way he managed everything else. An accomplishment had appeared in his field of vision, and his instinct was to control it. I'd read every message. I felt the old pull. The 9-year-old in the flower-covered kitchen, the one who wrote her name on the chalkboard next to the sourdough, still wanted her dad to say he was proud and mean it. But I was not 9 years old anymore. I set my phone face down on the counter. Some messages don't need a reply. Their silence raised me. My silence would define me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to punish them. I had simply left the game. You can't lose a game you stopped playing. The next morning, I woke up early. First day at Meridian. I stood at my kitchen window holding a cup of coffee from the flour mill. Greta's blend, the good stuff. The sun was coming up over the Ottawa River. The air was cold and sharp and clean. I breathed it in. I thought about table 14. I thought about the coat check and the kitchen doors and the steam on the back of my neck. I thought about how for 28 years they had put me at the back of every room and I had led them. Not anymore. I took a sip of coffee. It was perfect. Some people wait their entire lives for an invitation to the front table. I built my own table. And the view from here is better than anything they could have offered me. Peace isn't a table assignment. Peace isn't a speech or a standing ovation or a government contract. Peace is knowing that your worth was never theirs to decide. It was yours the whole time. You just had to stop asking them to see it and start seeing it yourself. Peace isn't given. Peace is baked from scratch.